The woman who got me fired, my stepmother Serafina, raised her glass to a room full of influential guests. To integrity, she toasted, her eyes locking on mine with triumphant malice. She had no idea I was seconds away from airdropping the photo of her and her lover to every phone at the table, including my father's. The murmurs of agreement from her guests, including the very CEO who'd canned me, filled the opulent dining room as my heart hammered against my ribs. Integrity. The word was a farce. I took a slow breath, stood up, and heard the scrape of my chair echo in the sudden silence. "Speaking of integrity, Serafina," I said, my voice clearer and colder than I expected, "I think it's time everyone knew about yours. And about Julian." I watched the color drain from her face, her perfect smile frozen in place. This was it. The point of no return. But this single sharp moment of detonation was the end of a very long fuse. To understand the explosion, you have to rewind, back to before the job, before the lies, back to when the fragile peace in our house still felt like it might, just might, hold. Let's start from the beginning. My father, Richard, was a good man, but a quiet one. After my mother died, the silence in our house became a presence of its own, a heavy blanket that smothered everything. He grieved, I grieved, but we did it in separate rooms, on separate schedules. So, when Serafina arrived, all bright colors and loud laughter, she didn't just enter our house, she conquered the silence. Dad started smiling again, that genuine, deep smile that reached his eyes, and for that, I was willing to try. For 2 years, I tried. Serafina was my father's wife, but she was never my mother. She was a different species entirely. My mom was gentle, thoughtful, an artist who found beauty in imperfections. Serafina was polished, sharp, a woman who collected influential people like charms on a bracelet, and whose primary art form was the curation of her own flawless image. Our relationship was a carefully constructed bridge of civility over a chasm of mutual suspicion. "That's a lovely design, Alara," she'd say, looking over my shoulder at my portfolio work. "Your mother had a similar hobby. Of course, she never tried to make a career of it. She was more of a homebody, much more content with the simple things." The subtext was always there, a little barb wrapped in silk. "You're trying too hard. You're not like your mother. You're too ambitious for your own good." It was her way of keeping me in my place. A gentle but constant pressure to remind me that I was the daughter of the first wife, the relic of a simpler, less impressive past. I was finishing my design degree, pouring everything I had into my portfolio. I wanted to work at Innovate Design more than anything. It wasn't just the top agency in the city. It was the place where creativity was currency, where ideas became movements. It was the summit, and I was determined to climb it. I never mentioned my application to Dad or Serafina. I didn't want the shadow of Serafina's influence anywhere near it. She sat on the board of directors, a position she'd acquired through a strategic merger years ago, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that if I got the job after she knew I'd applied, she would find a way to take credit for it. It would be her little favor, her act of benevolent nepotism, another jewel in her crown of manufactured perfection. My success had to be my own. The application process was grueling. A digital portfolio submission, a timed design challenge, a panel interview with 3 senior designers who grilled me on everything from kerning to campaign strategy. I walked out of the final interview feeling hollowed out but hopeful. I had held my own. I had answered with passion and precision. A week later, an email with the subject line, "Your future with Innovate Design," landed in my inbox. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely click it open. I got it. A junior designer position. On my own. I floated through the rest of the day in a daze of pure joy. That evening, I finally told them. Dad's face lit up with such unrestrained pride it almost brought me to tears. He hugged me, lifting me off the floor just like he did when I was a kid. "Ellie, that's incredible. Innovate. I knew you could do it. Your mom would be so proud." Over his shoulder, I saw Serafina. She was smiling, but it wasn't the kind of smile that made you feel warm. It was thin, tight, a performance of delight. "Innovate Design. she said, her voice a little too bright. Well, isn't that a coincidence? I know the CEO, Marcus Thorne, quite well. He's a dear friend. She paused, letting that information settle in the air. It's a very demanding environment. They have incredibly high standards. I do hope you can live up to them, darling. There it was, the casual assertion of her power, the subtle implication that I was out of my depth, and the first cold drop of unease in the warmth of my victory. She wasn't proud, she was territorial. I had just stepped into her world, uninvited, and she was already posting warning signs on the fences. I smiled back, a genuine smile for my father's sake. Don't worry, Serafina, I said. I plan to. The first few months at Innovate were everything I had hoped for. I was surrounded by people who spoke my language, who got excited about fonts and color theory, who lived and breathed design. I worked hard, stayed late, absorbed everything I could, and my efforts paid off. My team lead, a brilliant but no-nonsense designer named Anya, started giving me more responsibility. I wasn't just the new junior anymore. I was a contributing member of the team. I was put on the new pitch for the Northwind account, a massive eco-conscious tech company looking for a complete brand overhaul. It was the kind of project that could define a young designer's career, and I was thrilled. My life found a new rhythm, one that existed almost entirely outside my father's house. I'd come home late, tired, but creatively fulfilled, and the tension with Serafina seemed to fade into the background. She feigned a new level of interest in my work, which should have been my first warning sign. "How are things at the office, darling?" she'd ask at dinner. "Are you managing the workload?" "It's great," I'd say. "I'm on the Northwind pitch. It's a lot of work, but I love it." "Northwind," she mused, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on her wine glass. I had lunch with their vice president of marketing last week. She was saying they're looking for something very classical, grounded in tradition. You should keep that in mind. Sometimes these young tech companies try to be too edgy, and it backfires. The advice felt off. Everything in our brief said Northwind wanted to be seen as forward-thinking, disruptive, anything but classical. I politely thanked her for the tip and ignored it, sticking to the client's actual requests. My initial concepts, which were bold and modern, were a huge hit with Anya and the team. We were on the right track. The help became more frequent. One evening, I was working on some wireframes for the Northwind app, laying them out on the dining room table for a better overview. Serafina walked by, a cup of dark coffee in her hand. She stumbled, a theatrical little gasp escaping her lips as the coffee sloshed over the side of the mug and directly onto a crucial set of my printouts. "Oh my goodness, I am so terribly sorry, Alara. How clumsy of me," she said, dabbing at the mess with a napkin, her movements only smearing the brown liquid further into the paper. I felt a flash of hot anger, but her apology was so effusive, her panic so seemingly genuine, that I pushed it down. It was an accident. It had to be. I spent the next 2 hours reprinting and reorganizing everything. The sabotage grew bolder, though it was always cloaked in plausible deniability. She helpfully tidied my workspace while I was in the shower, accidentally misplacing a key sketchbook that I later found under a pile of her fashion magazines. She'd offer to make me tea while I was working late, and I'd find myself feeling unusually groggy afterwards, my focus shot for the rest of the evening. Each incident was small, isolated, easy to dismiss, but together they formed a pattern, a quiet campaign of attrition designed to make me fail. I saw it, but I didn't want to. Admitting it was real meant admitting that my father's wife was actively trying to destroy my career. The pitch for Northwind was in its final stages. The presentation was on a Friday. I had been given the honor of presenting the core creative concepts myself. This was it. My chance to shine, to prove to everyone, including myself, that I belonged there. The entire week was a blur of caffeine and relentless work. I barely slept, refining every slide, every graphic, every talking point until it was perfect. Thursday night, I was a bundle of nerves and adrenaline. My presentation was loaded onto my secure company laptop, the files triple saved and backed up to the cloud. I was doing one final run-through in my room when Serafina knocked on the door. "You've been working so hard, darling," she said, holding a steaming mug. I thought you might like some of my special chamomile lavender tea to help you relax. I was so exhausted and so focused on the presentation that I didn't think twice. Thank you, Serafina. That's really thoughtful. She smiled, placing the mug on my desk. Get some sleep when you're done. You need to be sharp tomorrow. The tea was calming, too calming. My eyelids grew heavy, and I decided to call it a night. I shut down the laptop, feeling confident and prepared. The next morning, I woke up feeling foggy, with a dull headache. I got ready, put on my best suit, and headed to the office early to set up. I opened my laptop in the conference room, my heart thrumming with anticipation. I clicked on the presentation file. An error message appeared. File is corrupted and cannot be opened. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. It was okay. I had backups. I logged into the cloud drive. The folder was there, but it was empty. The presentation, the source files, the assets, everything was gone. A void where 80 hours of my life's best work had been. I frantically checked my version history. The files had been permanently deleted at 1:14 a.m., long after I had gone to sleep. My blood ran cold. The tea. Anya and the team found me staring blankly at my screen. I tried to explain, but the words came out as a jumbled, panicked mess. It's gone. Everything's gone. I don't know how. Anya, bless her, tried to help. We scrambled to pull together what we could from old email attachments and local caches, but it was a ghost of the original presentation. It was disjointed, incomplete, and unprofessional. I stood before the Northwind executives and the senior partners of Innovate, including Marcus Thorne, the CEO. I stumbled through the presentation, apologizing for the technical difficulties. I saw the disappointment on their faces, the polite but vacant stares. I saw Anya's frustration, her belief in me curdling into pity. It was a public execution. I had never felt so humiliated in my entire life. I left the office in a daze, the word failure branding itself onto my soul. I couldn't go home. I couldn't face the house, couldn't face her. I ended up at a small, out-of-the-way cafe downtown, nursing a coffee I didn't want, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of my reality. And that's when I saw her. Across the street, Serafina was stepping out of a cab. She was dressed up, laughing at something the man who followed her out was saying. He was younger than her, handsome in a slick, corporate way. It wasn't just the way they were standing close together. It was the charge between them, an intimacy that was unmistakable. It wasn't a business meeting. A cold, clear thought cut through my grief. I had to know. I paid for my coffee, slipped out of the cafe, and started to follow them, staying on the opposite side of the street. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. They walked for a block before turning into the lobby of the Ashworth, a discreet, expensive, boutique hotel. I positioned myself behind a large planter across the street. A few minutes later, they reappeared near the lobby's large window, waiting for the elevator. He leaned in and said something in her ear. She tilted her head back and laughed, then she rose on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't a peck on the cheek. It was a long, lingering kiss, full of shared secrets. My hands no longer steady brought my phone up. I zoomed in, my thumb tapping the shutter button again and again. The images were clear, undeniable. Serafina and the man, Julian, as I would later learn his name was, locked in an embrace. And suddenly, everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The sabotage wasn't just about me. It wasn't just petty jealousy. It was a distraction. She was so consumed by her secret life that my presence, my success at a company where she was a known figure, had become a threat. What if I stumbled onto something? What if I became too visible, too connected? She hadn't just tripped me up, she had surgically removed me from the board to protect her own game. The corruption of my files was nothing compared to the corruption of her life. And she had made me the collateral damage. The devastation I felt morphed into something else, something hard and cold and sharp. It was fury. The summons came the following Monday, an email from HR with the subject, "Meeting to discuss your employment." It was clinical and terrifying. I walked into the sterile office and sat across from the HR manager and my now former team lead, Anya, who wouldn't meet my eye. The HR manager, a woman with a practiced, sympathetic frown, slid a folder across the table. "Alara," she began, "as you know, the Northwind pitch was of critical importance to the firm. Your failure to deliver the presentation was a significant blow." "The files were deleted," I said, my voice shaking. "They were sabotaged." She gave me a pitying look. "We understand you've been under a great deal of stress, but we can't find any evidence of a system breach or external interference. The deletion was traced to your authorized login. From a risk management perspective, the result is the same. There was a catastrophic failure on a major project under your lead. It was a perfectly constructed corporate execution. No accusations, just consequences. No room for argument. I was fired. My security pass was deactivated, and I was escorted out of the building with my belongings in a cardboard box, a walking cliché of failure. I drove home in a white-hot rage. I found Serafina in the living room, reading a magazine as if it were any other day. I dropped the box on the floor with a thud. "You did this," I said, my voice low and shaking. "You deleted my files. You got me fired." She looked up, her expression one of mild surprise. "Alara, what on earth are you talking about? Are you all right?" "Don't you dare," I hissed. "Don't you dare pretend you don't know. The tea, the accidents. You sabotaged me." She stood up, her face hardening into a mask of cool concern. "I think you need to calm down. You're being hysterical. I warned you that Innovate was a high-pressure environment. Perhaps you just weren't cut out for it, darling. It's nothing to be ashamed of." It was the most masterful display of gaslighting I had ever witnessed. She twisted my reality, reframing my legitimate accusation as the paranoid fantasy of an incompetent failure. She made me sound unhinged. "You are a liar," I said, the words tasting like poison. "I know what you did." "What you think I did," she corrected, her voice like ice. "You have no proof, and frankly, you sound incredibly ungrateful. I have done nothing but support you." The argument escalated until my father walked in. He saw me, red-faced and yelling, and Serafina, looking wounded and elegantly distressed. It was a tableau she had set perfectly. "What is going on here?" he demanded. I tried to explain. I told him everything, the words tumbling out in a desperate, frantic rush. The sabotage, the deleted files, the firing. He listened, his brow furrowed with worry, but he kept glancing at Serafina. When I was done, Serafina spoke, her voice soft and full of sorrow. "Richard, I think she's just overwhelmed. She's upset about the job, and she's lashing out. I told her I would help her, that we would get through this. I don't know why she's making up these terrible stories." And then my father, the man I had always counted on, delivered the final blow. He put his arm around his wife. "Ellie, listen to yourself," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You're not making sense. Blaming Serafina won't solve anything. You need to take responsibility for your own mistakes. Maybe a little time off is for the best." I stared at him, my heart shattering. He believed her. He had chosen his new, shiny wife over his own daughter. He couldn't see the venomous snake he was holding in his arms. He only saw the beautiful, glittering skin she showed him. I was completely, utterly alone. The rage I felt before was nothing compared to the profound, hollow ache of this betrayal. 2 days later, the announcement came. Serafina was hosting her annual dinner party that Saturday. It was her signature event, a meticulously curated gathering of the city's most influential people. She talked about it for weeks, planning the menu, the seating chart, the flowers. It was the centerpiece of her social calendar, the stage on which she performed her role as the perfect hostess with the perfect life. "Marcus Thorne is coming," she announced at dinner, looking directly at me. "The CEO of Innovate, and a few other board members. It will be a wonderful networking opportunity." The cruelty was breathtaking. She wasn't just rubbing salt in my wound. She was grinding it in with the heel of her designer shoe. "You should come, Alara. It's important to put on a brave face." A brave face. She wanted to parade her defeated stepdaughter in front of the very people who had cast her out, a living testament to her own magnanimity in the face of my failure. And in that moment, a cold, hard clarity settled over me. My grief and fury coalesced into a single, sharp point. She wanted a performance. I would give her one. Her public image was the most important thing in the world to her. It was her armor, her currency, her entire identity. And I had the weapon that could shatter it into a million pieces. The photos on my phone felt like a weight in my pocket, a promise of righteous destruction. The dinner party wasn't a threat anymore. It was an opportunity. It was the perfect stage, her stage, for the truth. The fury didn't dissipate. It chilled. It settled deep in my bones and became my spine. For the next few days, I was a model of placid compliance. I agreed to attend the dinner. I let Serafina offer me hollow words of encouragement. I let my father tell me how proud he was of me for being so mature about the situation. I played my part, all the while counting down the hours until the curtain would rise on my own final act. And so we returned to the dining room, to the toast, to the moment the pin was pulled from the grenade. My voice, having spoken Julian's name, hung in the air, a foreign object in the carefully constructed atmosphere of polite society. The genial chatter died instantly. Forks paused halfway to mouths. All eyes were on me, then on a pale Serafina. My father looked utterly bewildered. "Alara, what are you talking about? Who is Julian? Sit down." "No," I said, my gaze locked on my stepmother. "I've been sitting down for too long." I turned my attention to the table at large, my eyes finding the face of Marcus Thorne, the CEO. "Mr. Thorne," I began, my voice steady, all traces of the nervous girl from the failed presentation gone. "2 days ago, your company fired me for what was termed a catastrophic failure. I was told I was a risk, that I was responsible for the loss of the Northwind presentation. I'm here to set the record straight." A nervous murmur went through the room. Serafina shot a venomous glare at me, a silent command to stop, but I was beyond her reach now. "For the past several months," I continued, "my stepmother, Serafina, has been engaged in a systematic campaign to sabotage my work at your company, a company where she sits on the board of directors." "This is absurd," Serafina spat, finding her voice. "She's distraught about losing her job. Richard, do something." My father stood up halfway. "Alara, this is not the time or the place." "It's the perfect time and place," I said, holding up a hand to silence him, a gesture of authority that surprised even me. "It started with small things, bad advice disguised as helpful tips, accidentally ruining my work, but it escalated. The night before the Northwind presentation, Serafina brought me a cup of tea. The next morning, every file related to my work, including all my backups, had been professionally and permanently deleted from your servers, an action traced to my login but occurring at a time I was asleep. Marcus Thorne was leaning forward now, his expression shifting from annoyance to intense focus. The other guests were rapt, a captive audience to a drama far more compelling than any dinner party conversation. I was humiliated, I said, letting a sliver of the real pain show. I was fired, and I couldn't understand the motive for such cruelty. It seemed excessive, until I discovered the reason. You see, Serafina has a secret, a very big secret that my presence at Innovate threatened to expose. I looked directly at her. Her face was a marble mask of fury, her knuckles white where she gripped the tablecloth. She wasn't trying to protect the company from me, I told the guests. She was trying to protect herself, to remove any risk of her extracurricular activities coming to light. I let that hang in the air for a beat. Then I lifted my phone. "I believe you all have your devices handy. I'm about to share something with you." With a few taps, I selected the photos. The clearest one, the kiss outside the hotel elevator, and a second one, a wider shot showing the hotel's distinctive logo on the door behind them. I selected every person at the table from my airdrop menu. A series of chimes and buzzies echoed in the silent room as a dozen phones lit up at once. The chaos was instantaneous. There were gasps. A woman dropped her phone on her plate with a clatter. Marcus Thorne stared at his screen, his face a thundercloud of disbelief and rage. I saw a man I recognized from Serafina's charity board, Julian, shrink in his seat at the far end of the table, his face ashen. But my focus was on my father. He was staring at my phone, which I had angled towards him. He looked from the image of his wife in another man's arms to her face, then back again. The confusion on his face slowly morphed into a look of such profound, shattering heartbreak that it almost broke my resolve. Almost. "She's lying!" Serafina shrieked, finally breaking. "Those are fake! They're manufactured! Alara, you twisted evil little girl, how could you do this?" But her denials were drowned out by the irrefutable, high-resolution proof buzzing on the phones of every important person she knew. Her perfectly constructed world, her flawless image, her precious integrity, it was all imploding in a supernova of her own making. I didn't need to stay for the rest. My work was done. I calmly placed my napkin on the table, walked over to my father, and placed my house key beside his plate. The small metallic sound was louder than a gunshot in the tense room. "I believe this belongs to you," I said softly, my voice for his ears only. Then I turned, and without looking back at the wreckage of Serafina's life, I walked out of the dining room, through the grand foyer, and out the front door into the cool night air. I didn't run. I walked. With every step, I felt the weight of the last few months, the grief, the betrayal, the humiliation, begin to lift from my shoulders. I had lost a home, but I had reclaimed myself. The next few days were a blur of blessed silence. I stayed with my friend Chloe, who took one look at my face when I showed up at her door, and simply said, "My couch is your couch. I'll make tea." I ignored the barrage of calls and texts from my father, dozens of them. I wasn't ready. I needed the quiet. I needed to let the dust settle, both in the world and inside my own head. I felt strangely empty, but it wasn't a painful emptiness. It was a clean slate, a feeling of liberation that was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. News of the fallout trickled back to me. Chloe, a master of social media reconnaissance, gave me the highlights. The dinner party had, by all accounts, ended abruptly. Serafina's social media accounts went from hyperactive to completely dark. The juiciest piece of information came via a text from a former colleague at Innovate. "OMG, Marcus is on the warpath. Rumor is Serafina is being forced off the board. Something about a morals clause and conflict of interest." The most significant update came from my father himself. After 3 days of ignoring his calls, I finally saw a text that made me pause. "She's gone, Ellie. I've asked her to leave. We need to talk. Please." A week after what I was now thinking of as the detonation, a formal email appeared in my inbox. It was from Marcus Thorne's executive assistant, requesting a meeting. My stomach twisted with nerves, but I knew I had to go. I walked into the Innovate Design building not as a failure, clutching a cardboard box, but as a woman who had been summoned. Marcus met me himself. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. "Alara," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "First, on behalf of the entire company, I want to offer you my most profound and sincere apology. What happened to you was unacceptable." He explained that after the dinner party, he had launched an immediate and discreet internal investigation. They found the digital ghost of my deleted files in a deep archive, confirming the time of deletion. They also discovered that Serafina had used her board-level access to pressure my team lead and HR into expediting my dismissal. It was a flagrant abuse of power. "Serafina has tendered her resignation from the board, effective immediately," he said. "We're handling the fallout, but my priority right now is you. Your work before the pitch was exceptional. You are a talented designer, and you did not deserve what happened. I would like to offer you your job back." He went on, mentioning an increase in salary to compensate for the emotional distress and a direct reporting line to Anya, who, he assured me, felt terrible about her role in the proceedings. I finally met my father at a neutral location, a quiet park halfway between Chloe's apartment and what used to be my home. He looked older than he had a week ago. The characteristic ease was gone, replaced by a deep-seated weariness. "I am so sorry, Ellie," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was a fool, a blind, weak fool. I should have seen it. I should have listened to you. I should have protected you." There were no excuses, no justifications, just raw, honest regret. He told me how Serafina had confessed everything in a fit of rage when he'd confronted her, admitting to the sabotage, her words dripping with venom for me and my mother. He had been completely snowed, and the revelation had shattered him. Our conversation was fractured, painful. The damage to our relationship wasn't something that could be fixed in an afternoon. Trust, once broken, is a difficult thing to mend. But for the first time in years, he was seeing me, really seeing me, without Serafina's distorting filter between us. It wasn't a reconciliation, not yet, but it was a beginning. So, AITA? Was I the asshole for the method I chose? For turning a private betrayal into a public spectacle? Maybe. There was a part of me that wondered if there had been a quieter, less destructive way. But Serafina had waged a quiet war on me, using whispers and manipulations to destroy my life from the shadows. The only way to fight a creature of the dark is to drag it, kicking and screaming, into the light. She had built her entire world on a foundation of lies, and I had simply held up a mirror. The next Monday, I walked through the glass doors of Innovate Design. I accepted the job on my own terms, with my head held high. A few people looked at me with curiosity, others with a newfound respect. Anya greeted me with a genuine, relieved smile. As I sat down at my old desk, powering up the new, top-of-the-line computer they'd given me, I didn't feel like a victim returning to the scene of a crime. I felt like a professional, a survivor, a designer ready to create. I had lost a version of family I had tried so hard to believe in, but I had gained something far more valuable in its place. The undeniable truth of my own strength. I was ready to start over.